Steph Curry named second team All NBA. It's now the 11th straight season that Curry has been an All NBA team member when healthy. Did the Warriors give up on him too soon? And how are we in this position where we're still looking for Curry's help?
You are Locked On Warriors.
Stop trying to turn the page on us so fast.
Your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
We got 4 championships.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Every team has a chance if Steph's on the team.
Your team every day.
It's good, everyone. Welcome into Locked On Warriors. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your audio podcasts. You can also check us out on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button and that subscribe button right now. The thumbs up is free. The subscribe is free, and we very much appreciate it. Today, my guest is Evan Giddings, 95.7 The Game. I am Charlie Walter, formerly of 95.7 The Game, also worked at CBS News Bay Area. You can also hear Giddings on the radio call for the St. Mary's Gales men's basketball team. Little rundown of today's show. I want to get into a lot of Steph Curry and just discuss how the Warriors are in this position where we're still looking for Curry's help when it feels like they could have combined assets in the past to really having a super team still in Chase Center. Role players, who could they be? I've heard the name Klay Thompson brought up once again. Does this make any sense? A real center. I'm talking a real back-to-the-basket center that you could put the ball in his hands and he can score and he can protect the rim. Is that something that the Warriors are going to do in the Steve Kerr era, or is it just no? And then Kerr's extension. He's going year to year. This is it for him in terms of contract. What'll happen next year? All these things on today's show. What's good, man? How we doing, Ev?
I'm doing great. This time in the off season, it's time for pontification, Chuck. It's time to examine what went right, what went wrong. Obviously, the Curry news is big, and you named sort of the reasons why, all 11 of them. And to do it at his age, at his position, is pretty unprecedented. So, I'm just ready to go down the list with you. I'm glad we're chopping it up here on an early day in the week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go back to 2013-14, Curry makes second team All-NBA. And since then, he's made either first, second, or third every single season except for 19-20. That doesn't count. He only played 5 games in that season. And the question that I have for you right out of the gate is, it's clear that the front office did not expect this much from Curry for this long. I mean, if they did, after he was hurt in 1920, with the contract situation set up that they had, they wouldn't have gone after the most raw player in the draft in James Wiseman. And then after the 2021 season, that was arguably like the best season of his career, low key, averaged 32, was third in the MVP race. He carried that team to a play-in game against Memphis, and they would have won that play-in game if Draymond could have made a 4-footer in regulation. But after that season, they see how good Curry is, and instead of combining these assets, the 7th pick and the 14th pick, now Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, they decide to draft another raw player at number 7 in Kuminga, and now they have Kuminga and Wiseman, 2 of the rawest players in the game for the most part. They're trying to develop them, create this 2 timeline situation. Did we go 100% wrong here? Can we look back on this now and say, that was foolish what the Warriors did, knowing what we know now?
I think it's as much a compliment as it is a question mark, Chuck, because if you're saying that Curry is that kind of player who can literally carry a franchise past the quote-unquote dynastic era involving Durant, Klay, Draymond, all in their prime, then you're putting it into the hands of a player that you believe is one of the all-time greats. So in that respect, it's a compliment. And they won a championship a year later. So I can't necessarily fault the front office for not going all in, because they still got it done. I think more on the back of Curry than on the decisions of the front office. But involved in that Jonathan Kuminga deal was a ready-made, in his prime player, and Andrew Wiggins. That turned out to be a great move. And then the kind of requisite choice of Kuminga, Moody, those haven't necessarily paid off as much. So I think the front office, I wonder, and I'll throw this back at you, do you still think that they're kind of towing the line of the 2 timeline thing? That is the reason why we're having this conversation in the first place, because that's what it felt like coming off his injury, coming off of 2021. They were kind of in, but not all the way.
In hindsight, it made sense, right? Like when you go back to it and there are injuries like there were, and the team just isn't winning, and then 2021 playing team, whatever, you're not expecting Clay to come back from two devastating injuries and do much really of anything. And he proved to be a championship caliber player in 21, 22. I don't think the Warriors thought that Jordan Poole was going to have that level of ascension, that Andrew Wiggins was going to make that much sense. Everything went right.
Yeah.
I think the plan was at the time, hey, let's bring in James Wiseman. Let's bring in Jonathan Kuminga. Let's bring in all these young players. Let's stack up talent. Let's see if they can mesh with Curry. And then we can kind of go into that San Antonio Spurs second dynasty where, we have our Tim Duncan and Steph Curry, who may not be the best player on the floor, but is still championship caliber leader. And where they screwed up is Steph Curry has not only lost a step based on the second half of the season that he played this past year. Like, he's as strong as ever, man. He's putting up 50 in multiple games. And you look back on it, and it's extremely frustrating because they could have cobbled together all those picks. And we know Jrue Holiday was potentially available. Pascal Siakam, we've heard that name. Like, that's a championship level player. And they balked on all of them and said, we're going to go with this 2-timeline thing. And now they're potentially going to blow up the 2-timeline thing if they get rid of a player like Kuminga.
Well, I think they also got hit by the new CBA in a way that only one other team in the Los Angeles Clippers did, which was, I think they would have continued to foot these enormous tax bills and pay a ton of money, but there are consequences if you do that, as far as trading players, acquiring talent, and also your future draft picks. So they had to pivot sort of in the middle of it. And while I think they were a team that benefited from the big boom in the luxury tax back when Durant was available, they consequently got hit at a time in their franchise that wasn't great. So it's tough for me to say they didn't go all in, because you're right. Like, for example, James Wiseman was drafted the morning that Klay Thompson tore his Achilles. Like, you have to assume that he's never going to be the same player again, and you have to move in a different direction. Obviously, the pick was the issue, but the process was sound. Same a little bit later. It's like Curry at this stage in his career is doing something that no other guard, a point guard at his height, at his weight, has done in the history of basketball. So just assuming that he's going to continue to do that, while on one hand, as a fan, you can say that's great, this is who he is, and it's why he's one of the all-time greats. But as a front office member, as a decision maker, you kind of have to build in a contingency plan, no?
I agree with that. My biggest issue would be the contingency plan has to be the ready-made players. Like, even if you don't think they're the most talented, even if you think that James Wiseman and Jonathan Kuminga have all the measurables, like, based on where you thought you were going to be as a team, you wanted a player that could step in and contribute right away, not this like 3, 4, 5-year project down the road like Wiseman potentially was. The timing of everything just did not make much sense. But going back to it, the whole CBA thing definitely screwed things up, A. And then B, I truly don't think the front office thought that the Curry, Wiggins, Poole combo would work out that well to where they would have a championship caliber roster without these young guys playing a part in it. Because, I mean, Moody did get some minutes in that Mavericks series in the Western Conference Finals and, held his own in that series. But let's not act like Kuminga, Wiseman, or Moody had any impact on winning a championship in 21-22.
No, and I think that's why you saw them largely struggle, particularly Moses Moody in their first real postseason run this year. But they traded that guy away, or he got ruined, and it was Jordan Poole. To me, he was the one hope to have a ready-made in his prime player at the tail end of Curry's career. And I think, you look around the NBA now, the teams that are successful, they run a 3-guard rotation. And right now the Warriors are missing a third guard. That third guard was Jordan Poole. You look at how great the Pacers have played throughout this playoffs. It's because they have Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, and then even TJ McConnell, who can come off the bench and handle the rock. Like, around the NBA, you need these 3 guards that are able to play make for others. And the Warriors are clearly missing one. And it is a massive hole in their roster right now, in addition to some of the stuff that we'll talk about. So that guy was Jordan Poole. And due to unforeseen circumstances, he wasn't able to be that guy. But I think they had hoped that he could one day carry the mantle, even if it's a pretty damn big one for Steph.
Looking back on that trade, you get Chris Paul, but we all know at this point it's essentially a salary dump. You think the Warriors could have done that differently, or are you fine with them, bringing in Paul for a season and then saying let's reset and have some more money off the books?
Well, you can make the case that move directly relates to how they acquired Jimmy Butler. So I can't necessarily kill him for it. The thing is, you went from Poole, who's a 30-ish million dollar player, which with the rising cap is not crazy, to a player who now is 35, 36, who's going to make close to $60 million. So you essentially turn Jordan Poole in some way, shape, or form into a player that is at the end of their prime, that is double his price, and while is a winner and directly relates to you making a surge to the second round, is not someone that is going to be here in a couple of years. And it's a big risk. And so far, we could say it's been a success, but it's got to continue to be a success. And there's obviously a lot of question marks.
All right, names on the internet are starting to get attached to the Golden State Warriors. We've heard Kristaps, Porzingis. I Google search Golden State Warriors today, and the name Klay Thompson pops up. Let's discuss whether the names that are going to be on the Warriors this offseason or this upcoming season have already been talked about this offseason, or if we're going to get a bunch of players that we have heard nothing about thus far. That's coming up on Locked On Warriors. Let me tell you about WayFair. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or just a small balcony, WayFair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. They got a massive selection of outdoor essentials. They make it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup, from comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor. They've got it all and the prices that fit your budget. They got indoor stuff too. I just got an entertainment system in my basement yesterday, and they install it. So you don't have to get some form of a TaskRabbit. You just pay the extra dollars, whatever it is, and they come down and they install it. They got a mix of styles that I love. They make it super easy to find the pieces that match your vibe without spending a fortune. Delivery is free and hassle-free, even for the big stuff. And whether you're just relaxing solo or entertaining guests, Shop WayFair makes it easy to help you unwind. So shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair.com. WayFair. Every style, every home. Every style, every home. All right, man, back to it. Some of the role players that have been discussed around the Warriors this offseason, like D'Anthony Melton's an easy name that gets brought up because he knows the system. He played 6 games last year. He's probably going to be on the cheap. Brook Lopez has been someone that actually I saw yesterday. Let me get the exact. Was it the Lakers and the Warriors are the two teams that are interested in Brook Lopez? I saw.
That sounds about right. The two oldest rosters in the NBA.
So Brook Lopez is a name that we're looking at. Kristaps Porzingis is now one at 7'2" and someone that can shoot, that has been potentially tied to the Dubs. And then Klay Thompson was a name that I saw this morning, more of like a hypothetical. Would it make sense for the Warriors to bring back Klay? Any of these names kind of strike a chord with you when you hear them?
The one that stood out to me, and to me, I think he'd be a perfect two-way, also playmaker, is a guy that Steve Kerr showed in the Olympics he really loves, and that's Derek White. If the Boston Celtics are trying to get off of money, I think in 2 years, it's like their luxury tax bill is going to be $500 million.
I think it's Jrue Holiday, though. I think Jrue Holiday is the one that they'd move before Derek White. I think White's, unless Warriors gave him a good package, I think White's to stay based on people that cover the Celtics, and it would be Jrue Holiday is the one. The issue, he's $30 million. He's aging. He's 34. Does he make any sense?
In the immediate, yes, but he's got, I think, 3 years left. The White extension actually kicks in this offseason, so he jumps from an $18 million player to, I want to say 30 plus, and it goes through his age 34, 35 season. So That's the only way that I could see the Celtics perhaps getting off of him. Obviously, they're going to have to figure out what they want to do with next season being essentially moot, without Tatum being involved in it.
It's like the Warriors 2020, 2021, kind of to a degree.
Yeah, to an extent. I also think another Celtic on that team, like if you're just looking for cheap shooters, I think Sam Hauser would be a perfect option just for someone to come off the bench and bomb. As far as centers are concerned, I don't know about you, like the whole back to the basket, a guy that could step out and stretch the floor. Porzingis would be great. He just doesn't stay on the floor enough for me to give him that much. I honestly think it's kind of like a rim running big, a la Daniel Gafford. Pretty much just someone that can go down there and eat up minutes so that Draymond Green doesn't have his back blown out by December.
Yeah, and it sounds like Kerr has no intentions of playing Draymond more than he has to at center. Last 30 games of the season, maybe. And when it was brought up on Draymond's podcast, Dre even said, "Yeah, let's not do that. Let's get a big this season. It's pretty physically taxing on my body at this age to go up against these big dudes every night." One of the questions that I had, because I brought up Sabonis, DeMontis from Sacramento is like a perfect fit because he shoots it well. He's a legit back to the basket option. You can play a little inside out. He can move all right for his size. Not the best rim protector for a 7-footer, but he's got good fundamentals, can shoot it. Like I said, a double-double machine, gets boards. So if you run into the Rockets, he's going to help you there. And someone responded in the comments like Steve Kerr is never going to go for an offensive-minded first center. Like that's not what he's about. It's never what he's been about. Do you think it's more just circumstance because of the KDs, the Clays, the Currys? He's never had to have that like legit scoring big? Or do you think if the chips stacked up to the point where there was a big like that could score, let's say Porzingis, Kerr would welcome that into the lineup? Or does he literally want to go the small ball route?
No, I do think it's a little circumstantial because Steve Kerr won a championship with David Robinson and Tim Duncan. Like, it's not as if he's opposed to quality center play. I just don't think he wants just a big body. Like we talked about it last time, just because you're 7 feet tall doesn't mean that you can play. I do think that Kerr is someone that really emphasizes passing. He hates probably the way that the New York Knicks play basketball. As talented as some of those players are, pounding the air out of the leather is not something that he wants to see. And so Sabonis, to me, he's an interesting player, but he makes offensively someone like Draymond Green, I think, Chuck, obsolete because he's involved in everything that happens. And that's sort of Draymond's job, is to initiate offense. And if he's not out there doing that, he doesn't really have a place on that side of the floor. As far as offensively minded centers, it's not that he's opposed to them, but they have to be able to play defense. Like I think that's his two biggest things to me are you have to be able to defend and you have to be able to pass. And while I think Sabonis absolutely checks one of those boxes, the second one defensively is not so much in my mind.
Well, when you're talking about the defensive aspect of protecting the rim, Brook Lopez in his prime was one of the best at it. At this age, like, what do you think of Brook Lopez? We know that he can stretch the floor and hit some threes. We know he's a former Stanford guy. He gets a little homecoming. He's just been a class act in the NBA for a long time. Good leadership qualities, NBA champion. You're not going to knock him for any of those. But again, he's 38 years of age, durable, I will say. Plays much more than Kristaps Porzingis every single season, despite being that old. But in terms of like protecting the rim, do you still see him as someone that can get the job done down there?
I don't. I love the fact that he's still on the floor. I love the fact that he can, at his best, shoot at 40% from three. But the Warriors got picked apart whenever Quentin Post was on the floor, especially in the postseason. That, to me, is sort of where Brook Lopez is in his career. While Post is too young to be a good defender, Lopez is too old to be a good one. I think he was an All-NBA defensive player like 2 or 3 years ago, but a big reason why the Milwaukee Bucks could not stop anyone is because they had no interior defensive presence, and he's asked to be that guy. So to me, he's someone that, while he would fit the Warriors locker room, I also think everyone would welcome a presence like that. He'd be a great mentor. He'd be a consummate professional. He's not someone that I see helping them, for example, get from the second round to the conference finals, if you know what I mean.
How long's Robin been out of the league? I'm looking at this.
Robin Lopez. I don't think he was. I don't think he was on a roster last year. It was
Played in Milwaukee 23-24, which kind of shocks me. I felt like I guess the last time he received significant minutes was for Orlando in 21-22. But yeah, Robin is not an option. Brooke obviously is always been the better.
I mean, since we're going down the Celtics roster, it's like Luke Cornett. That's someone that
Al Horford.
Exactly. Well, Al Horford would be great. He could still play at his age. But again, it's just someone that I know these aren't all sexy names to a lot of people listening, but they're players that can fit, again, around Steph Curry. That's how we started the show. And that's how Steve Kerr, I think, is setting up everyone for this upcoming season. Like, you have to be able to play around the sun that is Steph, and the rest of the solar system has to be able to fit. If they don't, you will not play. And that applies to centers as well.
I think it's interesting, though, that it almost seems like the Curry, Draymond Green package has to be together. They had an easier time breaking up the Splash Brothers than they do Draymond Green and Steph Curry. And you mentioned that the only avenue to like a legit all-star caliber center, all NBA caliber center, would be to trade Draymond Green. But there's never any talks of Draymond being traded except for that Kevin Durant trade. We heard maybe Draymond and Kuminga during the deadline, and that's been all but confirmed that, it hasn't been confirmed that Draymond was in the package, but they were trying to get Durant. So I don't know what to think there.
Yeah, I think if they had been able to get KD, they wouldn't have minded Draymond going. I'll throw a player out at you, though. I haven't seen this player listed other spots, and maybe it's because he's unavailable. But if I could somehow turn Jonathan Kuminga back into Andrew Wiggins on this team, I think that's something that the Warriors would entertain. And
I think it would have to be deadline, though, because Slater said something about a year being in between to where they can't be, traded.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same reason why they couldn't go and acquire Lauri Markkanen this last offseason, who also I think is a name that's been thrown out. But that's someone that I would try and keep an eye on, because we already know what he can do in this system. And if Wiggins was playing in this past series on this past team, that's a pretty scary roster. If you have a one guy who that can pick up the best perimeter player on the other team, as much as Moses Moody did a fine job, Kuminga did a fine job. He's a proven one defender, in my opinion.
All right, let's talk a little Steve Kerr. An extension potentially coming up, or is this the last year for Kerr? Obviously, the Butler, Curry, Draymond Green contracts have 2 more years. Steve Kerr has 1. And then a lead ball handler, aside from Steph Curry. Is it just going to be a combination of Podziemski, Pat Spencer, and the crew, or will they find someone that is a legitimate ball handler and has been for a long time in free agency? Let's get to that coming up on Locked On Warriors. Let's start with a ball handler. True point guards, like outside of Steph Curry, true point guards in the Golden State Warriors have not necessarily been synonymous. I mean, they had their Ty Jeromes in the last few years, and they go after Chris Paul for the system. But aside from that, like, name them on one hand. There have not been that many. Do you think that the Warriors look to a potential lead ball handler off the bench this offseason, or are they just going to kind of rely on pods to get a little bit tighter with his handles?
Well, I do think they are going to rely on Podziemski, but I would hope it's actually more of as a bench player than as a starting shooting guard, which is what his role was at the end of the season. And you're right. Like the best backup guard or point guard that I can recall since Steph Curry's been here was Jarrett Jack. That was all the way back in 2013.
Because they were going like Livingston handling the ball, and they've just gone with bigger players handling the ball. Yeah.
I mean, Livingston, of course, is a winner, but like a true point, they just haven't. I mean, it's been the Quinn Cooks, the Patrick McCaws, players that while they served a purpose, they're not someone on this team that you're going to rely on. I mean, I think DeAnthony Melton is certainly an option to try and bring him back. I think that there are some players out there that they would like to pair alongside Steph, but this is the thing, and this is what really they didn't have last year that they're looking for, it's got to be someone that can defend on the perimeter alongside Curry. Curry's no slouch defensively, but you have to be able to switch. And to me, Podziemski or Hield, who was better than expected this year, those two guys just got hunted relentlessly, whether it's by Houston, by Minnesota. And they need someone who can stop the point of attack, and they just don't have that player right now. So to me, that's the ideal guard next to Curry, not necessarily a point, but someone that is going to be able to stay in front of his man.
A guard that's been next to Curry, that's stayed in front of his man for a while, and that's been a part of an NBA championship, and it's a pretty big part of last year when healthy. Gary Payton II. Do you see him as someone that the Warriors would bring back? Who is more likely, rather? Here's the question: Looney or Payton to return for the Warriors? If you were a betting man,
I would say Looney, because he's already a vet min player and he's more reliable as far as his health. Like, I think Gary, if Gary, you could tell me that Gary's going to play 70 games next year off the bench, absolutely sign him immediately. Not to his current deal. I think he was making like 9 last year, but I think he's someone that the Warriors are going to have to let go, but they absolutely have to replace his ability to at least just be thrown in and give you a chance to stop a John Morant or a Damian Lillard or a Kyrie Irving, just some sort of quick guard, because that was their biggest problem last year. So I would say Looney.
I'm going to throw you about 10 names that are free agents this upcoming season. Van Fleet, he's got a club option. Kyrie, he's got a player option. Brogdon, D'Angelo Russell, that's not going to happen. Dennis Schroeder, not going to happen. Chris Paul, not going to happen. Trey Jones, Javon Carter, Davion Mitchell. Who's an unrestricted free agent that we can look at? Patty Mills, Spencer Dinwiddie, Kyle Lowry, Tyus Jones, Cam Payne. Any of these names sound enticing to you?
Not really, but no,
Bring back Schroeder.
No, those. Well, he served a purpose.
Yeah, he served a trade ship purpose, but the fit was just never. It didn't work.
No, I mean, I know that someone like Kobe White is a name that people really like from Chicago. He might be too pricey, but that's someone that you can absolutely plug and play with. And then, you mentioned him earlier. I don't think he's off the table as them trying to go get Jrue Holiday. Like, if you're really all in on this one upcoming season, it's the last year of Steve Kerr's contract. It's the last year before Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler can negotiate, I think, contract extensions. And you're going to have to make a choice on Draymond's contract extension, by the way, this summer, if you want. Like, go try and get Jrue Holiday, see if these old guys can get it done one last time, and then potentially make a choice to blow it up.
Steve Kerr, one more season on his contract, said he loves coming to work every single day. Last year's team was a joy to coach. They meshed well in the locker room. They enjoyed coming to Chase Center every day to put the work in. Says he has no idea. Can't imagine a world where he decides to step away. It would kind of have to be the Warriors saying, we're not going to do this again after this upcoming season. What do you think they do in terms of an extension, in terms of letting the thing expire? Could it be just kind of a year-to-year ordeal? That's the way that Kerr's looking at it right now. Could they extend them for 2-3 years past Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler? Like, when you get to this precarious position right now where all the guys that have helped make Steve Kerr and Steve Kerr's helped made champions have 2 years and he has 1 year. Like, how do you typically look at this? Because usually it doesn't line up this way, it feels like.
No, I think it is year to year. And that applies to the whole team. Like, as long as Steph Curry is still playing at a high level, I think that Steve Kerr has to be the coach, which is funny because I actually think if Steve Kerr got a bunch of young guys, like without the pressure of having to win or the pressure of having to revolve around a particular Hall of Famer or superstar, I don't think he would be a bad coach. But his loyalty is to those big 3 veteran players. He's made that explicitly clear. And so there's not a ton of room for any of the young guys on this roster right now. So that's why, one, I don't mind if the roster necessarily gets older. I think long-term it's going to hurt, but next year would be a path. And then for Steve Kerr, every single year from here on out is a prove-it year. Like, if you make the playoffs and you win a series, you get to come back next season. But if you flame out, you don't make the playoffs, maybe this team sputters, God forbid an injury happens to one of your best players, and you realize you have to pivot as a franchise, that's probably the end of Steve Kerr.
I 100% agree with you, man. Win and you're in for another year, and you lose, and it's just, I mean, Curry's not going anywhere, but for everyone else, I think it's just jailbreak, right? You got to figure out something to do, and what the next path is going to look like past 2027.
Yeah.
Because you'll have a lot of money coming off the books, and they're going to have a ton of draft picks coming up. Pick 41 for the Warriors. What should they do with that? I'm not talking individual players. I'm just saying trade it, trade up, trade back, go for more picks down the road. Try to do the old 2-for-1 method. How would you use this thing? Attach it to a deal?
No, I think they'll use it. I think they have to use it, actually, just because they're going to eventually run into money constraints, and you need a cheap player on the roster. Like, as much as people may not like Trace Jackson Davis or Quentin Post, those players got, I think, 2-year deals with team options because you have to fill out the back end of your roster. So I think they're going to do the same. I don't think they're going to take another big, though, this year. I would expect them to try and actually find somewhat of a guard. Because to your point, Chuck, we're talking about players they don't have. They don't really have anybody who can handle the ball. And I think we're learning from this postseason, you have to play with pace. And at 41, you're not going to find, the next Tyrese Halliburton or the next Ja Morant. But you could find a decent point guard, and I think that's what they're going to go for.
As of right now, the ESPN mock draft has them taking Hanson Yang from China. Interesting prospect, huge dude. Yeah. And then at 40, right before him, it's Chaz Lanier from Tennessee at the guard position. So we'll see. We'll talk more about that as draft day approaches. But Evan, always enjoy you joining the program. Our Tuesday guy moving forward, who decided to join us a day early on a Monday. You have yourself a wonderful day. And to everyone listening, wherever and whenever, find us on YouTube, find us on Spotify, Apple. Give us that 5-star review, that thumbs up. We very much appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon. Peace, Evan.